Innovation is such an important topic that it's worth spending some time in being absolutely sure about what's meant by innovation. It's an important topic for economic growth. It brings about change in the industrial base of a country or in the working practices within a country. It permeates nearly all aspects of our working lives. So it's important that we understand it and we fully appreciate it. And to that end, this is one of several videos that talk about this idea of innovation, what's meant by it, and what are its essential features. So no apologies for having several videos on essentially the same type of material. It's a very important subject. It's something that we need to understand, and each video has a slightly different emphasis. So let's look ahead again. Let's look at the introduction to innovation. And in this context, we want to talk really about the meaning of innovation. So companies face strategic, competitive, and dynamic pressure. Dynamic or innovative pressure arises out of rapid technological change. We live in a time where there is a lot of change, a lot of technological change. We see different approaches and facilities in all aspects of our lives that were not hitherto considered or even considered possible. So, for example, we have internet banking. We can purchase items online and get them delivered. We can book tickets online. We can acquire knowledge without going to college. We can acquire knowledge from our phones or from our laptops at home. We can do courses. There's been a lot of changes in the way in which we live. And these are not slowing down. These changes are still running apace. And technology seems to be improving all the time. There's one version of this called Moore's Law, which states that technology doubles in capacity every 18 months or so. We don't have to worry whether that is precisely true. The sentiments are true, and that's the important part. Technology is improving, and it seems to be improving all the time. And that has an impact on our lives. So it's important for us to understand innovation and to understand this dynamism that's within the economy. And this dynamism leads to changes in the way we live and work. Technological, logistical, and the growth of international competitiveness all act as an impetus for innovation. All of these factors come together to give us this idea of a changing society. And once we realize it's changing, it ceases to be an idea and becomes a fact. We experience it. We experience the changes. And as I said, this runs right away the way across society, from the way we pay for our groceries in the supermarket. We may use a touch card, or we may use Apple Pay, or we may use our phones to pay. Now, all of this would be amazing to previous generations. All of this was unthought of or unheard of in the past. And yet, we're living with it on a daily basis now. Organizations may innovate. They may innovate the products. The items we purchase do look different, and more or less on a regular basis they're updated. There are some items which still remain the same. For example, foodstuffs. Food item, product is still essentially the same. A potato is a potato. And a potato today looks very much like a potato 100 years ago. So some items can't be changed, but the productivity of getting the potato to you will have changed. Farmers will use mechanized machinery to dig up the potatoes and process them and grade them and package them and distribute them. In the past, that may have been done by workers. But other products are manifestly different. Television sets are a lot different today than they were, say, in the 1960s. Radios are a lot different. And needless to say, telephones are utterly different. So it goes on and on. We could go across all the products we can imagine, and they've all, to some extent, been influenced by technological change, by innovation. And the reasons why they've been innovated is to give the companies an opportunity to gain market share and to gain competitive advantage over their rivals. But of course, this provokes the rivals to then innovate. So we have a competitive process in innovation itself. One company trying to out-innovate its competitors. So organizations may innovate products, but they may also innovate processes. They may also look at what's happening within the production unit, within the factory or within the office, and look for ways in which productivity can be increased. It might be a new computer system in the office that streamlines communications, that processes information in different ways and produces outputs which are easily understood and do the job. Far more efficient than someone sitting down with a typewriter. And in the factory, it may be computer-aided manufacturing techniques, where machines and computers are brought together to do specific tasks. In distribution, as we'll see in a second, it's also the case. So in distribution, we see lorries which have now got quite advanced navigation systems, but they also have tracking systems, and it's meant to make the driver's life easier. It's also meant to ensure that deadlines are met. And with that, there is the movement towards JIT, just-in-time production. So factories are able to produce a certain part of the product and then deliver it to the other factory for assembly and ensure that it arrives just in time, just to come off the lorry, go straight onto the production belt and be processed straight away. In other words, a strict JIT system will not have a stores system. They don't take the items off the lorry and put them into a stores and then take them out of the store later and bring them into production. They may take them off the lorry and put them straight into production. It's just in time. And all of this is facilitated through various innovations and changes brought about in distribution. And indeed, organizations themselves are subject to change and design. For example, smaller companies can now, with access to quite advanced computer packages, can now do in-house what was previously outsourced. They can now process information that in the past it would take an expert to process, but now the computers are capable of analysing data and giving the results, and the results need to be just interpreted. And sometimes indeed the packages interpret the results. So organizations have changed, which means our concept of a company, of a production unit, is probably different today than it has ever been. Now there seems to be less barriers and less obstacles. And all of this is the product of innovation. Innovation is, if you like, the mutation of products and services over time, each mutation being an innovation, being an improvement, a change, leading up to what we've got now. But the process doesn't stop now, it continues. And whilst we're working on this, this class on innovation, there will be people in industry and commerce all over the world working on the next big idea. For them, the next big idea could be bringing out a new product, or varying the way in which existing products are sold or priced, or and as we sit here doing this particular class on innovation, as I said, the world is moving on. Traditionally, innovation was seen as improvements on an existing design. It overlaps with entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship is alertness to profit opportunities. That's our standard definition. There are many definitions of entrepreneurship, but the one that we quite like is the Kersner definition. Alertness to profit opportunities. That's all it is. It's people who are alert to a profit opportunity and who will then go on to capitalize or to implement changes that will realize those profit opportunities. But in other videos, we talk about invention being an entrepreneur thinking about some product or some service and coming up with something new. That's the initial stage. That's bringing something into existence. But once it's brought into existence, then, if you like, there are minor entrepreneurial interventions. These are the mutations I was talking about earlier. These are the innovations, taking the initial concept through time, changing it in line with changing market conditions or consumer preferences. And this is the process of innovation. Entrepreneurship determines whether a product or service will be offered for sale on the market. It's the entrepreneur who thinks of an idea, a commercial idea, but then thinks, is it worth doing? Does it have profit potential? Sometimes entrepreneurs may be more altruistic and come up with an idea which they think will help mankind, but it hasn't got profit potential. It'll just be a good idea. It's a good idea to help society. And that's laudable. That's good. And we get a lot of changes in general society which are not aimed at producing a profit. They're just aimed at making improvements to our lives. But here, in the context of business studies, we're focused in on making the profit. Because in making profit, there is employment. And as profits are sustained, employment will be sustained. And that improves the welfare of the people. So, entrepreneurship determines whether a product or service will be offered for sale on the market. Not everyone can be a good entrepreneur, unfortunately. Some people don't have the judgment. Some people have the judgment, but perhaps don't exploit it. They're not truly entrepreneurial. They have good ideas, but they just don't want to take them forward. Some people have good ideas and take them forward. And once those ideas have been taken forward and produced, we all benefit from better products, new products. Innovators will adjust the design and attributes of the product to more fully align it with customers' requirements. You see, the entrepreneur comes up with the idea, and let's say it's an interesting idea, it's something people haven't done before, and it is clearly commercial, let's say. Well, having come up with the idea, that insight, then innovators, and these could be colleagues of the entrepreneur or interested parties, or it could be the entrepreneur, him or herself, will start to tweak the idea, start to change the idea and align it more with what customers want. So the initial invention is the broad idea. But later on, it's tweaked through innovations to make it more refined and more acceptable to the customers. Innovators may modify organizational and production processes to improve quality and or reduce costs. So innovators are not just looking at products and innovating the product, changing the product in line with what customers want. Innovators are also looking at the organization, looking at the ways in which production takes place, looks at the production processes, and looks for better ways, looks for greater efficiency, better ways of producing. So it's streamlining the organization. So there are two parts to innovation. One is looking at the product and aligning the product with what customers want. That's part one. Part two is looking at the organization and streamlining the organization and cutting costs. Joseph Schumpeter in the 1930s saw innovation as bringing about several different, or being composed of several different components. Now, there is a separate video on Schumpeter, and Schumpeter arises several times in our various videos on innovation, but it's worth restating it. It's worth going back over. So we'll reproduce it here. Schumpeter was the one who was most credited for introducing innovation into the literature. Economists up to that point were not really concerned with things like innovation. Economists were looking at market structures and at unemployment and inflation, and back in the 1930s there was a lot going on in Europe, and unfortunately they were also getting ready for war and war preparations. And Schumpeter lived in Austria. He was a government minister, but he was also a leading academic, and he's made massive contribution to economic theory, and he was very much focused on the whole idea of innovation and the importance of innovation. So he saw it as bringing about a new product. Well, a new product comes from invention. Invention is just looking at something new, developing something new. If it has got profit potential, then it becomes an economic product. So it's developing something new. It's the invention of a new product or a new process. And if it's got commercial potential, then it is, by definition, it is economic. It is part and parcel of what we should be studying. So it could be a new process, and Schumpeter was aware that that's important to have processes in. So we have the two parts here of innovation that we talked about just a few moments ago. The newness of the product and the newness of the production routines and the design within the business and the streamlining of the business we talked about earlier. But it could also be opening up a new market. Perhaps a particular section of the population or a section of the population overseas are not serviced in some way with some product, and designing a product and delivering a product targeting that population is an innovation. It's something new. It's a new product. Perhaps it's entering a new market. It's changing a market. So it's innovation. It could be a new way of organizing the business. Not just introducing a new process within the business, but radically looking at the business itself, looking at the design of the business, looking at its location, looking at the way it's structured, looking at the various departments and who reports to who, and looking at the bureaucracy of the business and trying to streamline again. It's trying to bring about a more efficient organization. Also, a new source of supply. Sometimes people have ideas about new products and want new products and want to deliver certain products, but unfortunately the capacity to do so is limited or non-existent. So, for example, innovators and entrepreneurs in the past were probably very frustrated by the lack of access to power units. Batteries did not exist in the way they exist today. And that's not to say that today's solution, the lithium battery, is going to continue ad infinitum. We're going to run out of that material. It is very precious material. But the lithium battery is a big innovation in power sources. And the modern world seems to rely on that type of power system. We have it in mobile phones, we have it in smartphones, we have it in laptops, we have it, we're even running cars on it. But it is a depletable resource. So the research is on to try and find a replacement for that type of battery. So there must be a new source of supply, and there must be a constant quest for a new source of supply. It would be foolish just to wait for existing supplies of lithium to run out and then for us to have nothing. So at the moment, there are research departments across the world looking to see if they can develop some alternative, some other way of powering units. So these were the 5 ideas of Schumpeter in relationship to innovation. It's important to have a good foundation in our understanding of innovation. It's important to understand the basis of it. And Schumpeter gave us that back in the 1930s. That's all we're going to deal with here. That's a further introduction to innovation and the meaning of innovation. So with that, let's leave it there and say thank you for watching.